The following is an encore presentation of stories from the Dooralong Transformation Centre. 9 minutes past 10 here on 94.9 Rima Central Coast. We're joined in the studio by Dave. Dave's one of the guests down at Dooralong Transformation Centre. So good morning to you, Dave.
Good morning, how you going?
I'm going well. Look, I'm a little bit sort of, I don't know, uneasy, because I know you've had your own career in radio. Yeah, tell us about that.
I was living in Byron Bay around between 2005 and sort of 2010-11, and for a year there I volunteered at Bay FM and at a hip-hop show on a Saturday night from 10 till 12.
Yeah.
Graveyard shift.
All right.
And I used to get up there and play a lot of music, so yeah, it was good fun. I was just looking at your board here and remembering, learning that and all the mistakes one can make if they're not concentrating.
Oh yeah, I can make them whether I'm concentrating or not. It's quite easy for me to make mistakes. But thanks for coming in this morning. Dave, how long have you been at Dooralong now?
5 months roughly, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
From where? Where were you before Dooralong?
I'd actually been travelling up the East Coast. I actually was in Innisfail not long before I came back down. I'm just out and about travelling with a mate. We'd been working and doing some building and finished that job and decided we were just going to go and travel. Both of us like to go and see things.
Yeah.
We were travelling up there and, yeah.
Travelling's been quite an important part of your life, hasn't it?
I've just been lucky. It's just been my story, Yeah, I've been lucky to go and see some places that maybe not everyone gets to see, and that's been a lucky part of my story.
Not just New South Wales?
Not just New South Wales, yeah.
You've been all over Australia?
Yeah, I've been up to the top and...
Top to bottom, left to right?
Yeah, pretty much bar sort of some of the west coast. I haven't been up to the top of the Kimberleys, yeah.
But you've seen more of Australia than a lot of people, I think.
I think so.
Yeah. How do you do that? Motorbike?
4-wheel drive.
Air-conditioned 4-wheel drive.
Air-conditioned 4-wheel drive if the aircon's working.
Yeah. Okay, tell us a little bit about yourself, Dave. You're a young guy. You travelled around Australia. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in the eastern suburbs of Sydney, so around Bondi.
Nice.
And I went to school there, and for all intensive purposes, had a pretty normal upbringing.
Yeah.
I was an only child, but I went to school and played sport and went to the beach and bodyboarded a lot and skateboarded and all that sort of stuff you do when you're a kid. Sort of
iconic, sort of Aussie kid, sort of childhood by the sound of it.
I would have thought so. Yeah.
A family life, that was okay?
Well, my parents split up when I was a baby, so I sort of grew up with my father, and he moved back in with his parents, so I had my grandparents and my father, and then I would see mum on like every other weekend sort of thing. So I guess in that regard, no, that wasn't ideal. But that's what it was.
Yeah. And it's not uncommon in this day and age with fractured families, is it, to have kids where they're splitting their time between their parents?
Yeah, I see a lot of it.
Yeah. And so you had this great childhood, certainly growing up around Bondi and the beach, as I say. When did things start to go wrong for you, Dave?
I started to sort of rebel and when I was sort of just prior to my teenage years, and I guess both of my parents having had to establish themselves again. I guess you are a unit and then you separate, and those two having to establish themselves again, I didn't really get the attention that I desired, and I found that causing trouble was a good way of getting attention. So I went at that wholeheartedly and ran amok.
So it was a deliberate sort of attempt on your part to...
In hindsight, absolutely.
Yeah, to get mum and dad to notice you and give you the love.
Yeah, and it's taken me years to work this out, But that's what it was.
Yeah. So how did that look at me behaviour? What sort of behaviour was it?
I was just doing anything and everything to get myself in trouble, stealing, lying, swearing, fighting, whatever it was.
You have an addiction with alcohol. Was that playing a part in your life at this stage?
Yeah, I mean, I started smoking weed and I started taking drugs and going to, you know, rave parties and stuff when I was a teenager, and drinking was a huge part of it, you know. I started doing that stuff pretty young, and that was part of the rebellion, you know. That was part of the, you know, not doing what I was told to do, and drinking was a huge part of that.
Did you recognise it at the time that I'm rebelling, I'm getting into trouble because I want mum and dad to notice me and give me attention, or was it no? This is an awareness that you have now that at the time was missing.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, at the time I was just having fun, you know, and being a kid.
You were a young lad, mid-teens. It's sex, drugs, rock and roll.
I was invincible.
You were invincible.
Yeah, and there was no later on in life or setting up for later on in life. There was just living in the moment and for now, and not considering any repercussions of my behaviours at all.
And the drinking, was it getting progressively more serious?
Well, when you're that age, everything's is a binging situation, I think. So it was just when I could get it, and I would have it on the weekends. It hadn't become a daily operation, and it, you know, you're young and you're fit and you're healthy. You can back up, you know, and you know, but you know, there was, you know, the ends of weekends there was black eyes, and you know, there was, you know, just the loss of memory. I would black out back then, and you know, have to be told what I'd gotten up to, and generally it would not be something that I was incredibly proud of. You know, but back then, you know, the people that I was hanging around with, you weren't going to say anything about that. But I think deep down inside, knowing myself better now, I know I wasn't proud of any of that stuff.
Did it worry you? Did you, waking up and not knowing how you spent the previous night or what you may have done, did you think, hey Dave, you really need to get a grip?
Well, I didn't choose that. I chose to drink and avoid that reality. You know, I would just run from it. You know, run from the reality of what I was doing to myself. Yeah.
And what age are you now that we're talking about?
Beg your pardon?
And at what age would you be at this time?
Oh, look, I mean, this is, you know, I carried this through all the way till now. You know, it's I mean, obviously, my behaviour, you know, when I got out of my teens, I stopped rebelling so much, and once I sort of got my own independence and realised that I needed to fend for myself and have work and stuff like that, you know, I changed my behaviour. You know, and especially when I started to sort of realise the drinking was no good, and to trying to combat it, you know, I changed a lot, and but the drink just it was always there. You know, it would always call me back. You know? So you had a level of self-awareness that you had an issue. Yeah, I've known that you know. The writing's always been on the wall. Yeah. You know, it's always been on the wall. I didn't know how to live in a different way. So what would a typical day, we turn the clocks forward to say your early 20s, so you're a little bit more mature now, but drink is still an important part of your life. What would a typical day look like for you? Well, my drinking was sort of like a binging situation, so a normal day for me would be going to work, you know, and then, you know, once I'd finish work, and I would work hard because I needed to justify the fact of having a drink. But, you know, when I'd finished work, I would need to drink. And the problem with me picking up a drink is that I can't tell you when I'm going to put it down. And, you know, a lot of the time that would negate me going to work the next day, you know, and then you're looking at, you know, issues of employment and those sort of things. And it really is starting to take a toll on your life. So this isn't just a weekend thing? No, that's right. And it would fluctuate, and it would have its highs and its lows, and sometimes it would be bad, and then I would pull up. And this is the tricky thing about it, you know. This is the reason one of the reasons I've struggled with it for so long is that, you know, sometimes it would be bad, and then I would pull up, and it would be okay. And did that lead you to believe that you had some control over it, the fact that you could pull back? I think I always thought that I had it in me to control it, and that you know, it was a message that was always inside my head from a very young age that, you know, you can do anything. You know, so I always thought I'd be able to control it, and I was just lying to myself, really.
Deceiving yourself.
For a long time.
Yeah. And we're back. It's 23 minutes past 10. We're back talking with Dave this morning. Dave was explaining just before that music break of his early life, his turn to alcohol, but how he had this idea that he still had it under control, because there were times when he was able to pull back from the brink. So yeah, he thought he had it under control, but that's not the case, is it, Dave?
No, not at all. Never had it under control. It had me well and truly every time.
And it's not a good friend to have, alcoholism. What sort of friend is it? What does it do to you?
Well, I mean, it's sort of like a situation where it convinces you that it is the answer, and slowly for me, it just removed everything from me and around me, and left me on my own without the ability to fend for myself anymore, and dumped me there. And at the end of the day, I can see it was just going to kill me. It really was.
So it lies to you? And
absolutely.
And then it just ruins your life.
Yeah, I'm going to give you everything that you wanted. I'm going to make you feel secure and confident. I'm going to give you the answer to your problems.
Yeah.
But while I'm doing that, out the back door, I'm going to take everything from you.
And what did it take from you?
Everything. It left me. It left me as a shell. I'm a 36-year-old man who has not got the living skills of other 36-year-old men. I basically just spent my whole life pretending, because I needed to compensate for the fact of how I felt, and the only way that I compensated was alcohol. I hid and ran and pretended, rather than growing and learning and experiencing. I just sort of put up a facade and pretended, from what I saw, and drank.
Does it rob you of your self-worth? Do you like yourself?
Today I do.
Yeah, but then?
No, not at all. Not at all. And that's why my relationships were hard to handle, because I would put on a facade that just wasn't real, and there's only so long you can carry that around before cracks start to appear and people start to see what you're really like. Yeah. So I had to live a life where I was nomadic and didn't have attachment to anyone or anything. I'd pop up here and there and disappear again, because you'd see who I was or find out who I was.
So when we were talking earlier about how wonderful it was and how great it was to travel around Australia and lead that nomad life, for you there was an ulterior purpose. You were actually sort of moving on. In
many ways there was a lot of that, in many ways there was a lot of that, and I'm sure if I was to go around this country, you'd have in certain places there would be people that would say Dave was a great guy, where did he go? And there would be people that would say the opposite.
Yeah.
And there's just the total inconsistency, and
it's almost like
a lot of confusion. I leave confusion in my wake. I just have that ability.
But also carry it within your own head.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So was there a particular point in your life, because we now know that you are at Dooralong, was there a particular point or a situation in your life where you thought, for goodness sake, Dave, this has really, really got to stop, otherwise I don't know where it's going to lead?
I think, look, the reality for me was, I completed the bridge program with the Salvation Army at William Booth House in 2015, and then subsequently picked up a drink again, and during that year of drinking I really saw myself. It was as though the drinking didn't work anymore and the buffer wasn't there. I just blatantly saw how I was as a human being, and it was very ugly, and it sort of left me at a point where I just couldn't see a way forward, and that was when suicide really became, a constant ringing in my mind, and it was just constantly at me and at me and at me, and when I came back from travelling, I was faced with the realisation that I had a bit of money and we were driving back into Sydney, and I was thinking how much it was going to take for me to drink to go down to the Gap and jump off, and I'm looking at the money I've got and I'm thinking I can get this much, and this is where I was, and that's what I was going to do. And
so this friend that we were talking about, alcohol being in the early, or the way it lies to you to make you think it's your friend, it's now making you take your own life, jump off the gap.
Well, I think that's what the intention always was.
Yeah.
You know, and somewhere along, you know, that trip back into Sydney, you know, it came into my mind that I should get a hotel for the night, have a feed, and lob up to William Booth House with the Salvation Army again at 7 a.m. the next morning and plead my case. And it was interesting because that night I was in the hotel room, I was just shaking, and it wasn't to do with the alcohol. I actually hadn't drunk in a couple of days. It was, you know, I think it was just the fact that I was at a point where I wanted to go and kill myself, but something was stopping me. And it was just a very emotional event. And the next day I went to William Booth House. And
you're completely on your own. You had no sort of close friends. This was a long night of the soul that you faced on your own.
In my mind, I'd burnt it all, and I say in my mind, you know, because that's what I told myself. Now I know that I've got plenty of people I could have talked to out there that love me, but in my mind, that's where alcohol had taken me, and that's where it wanted me.
Yeah. And at this point, we should remind our listeners that if any of these sort of adult themes that we've been talking about, particularly around suicide, if they're worrying you, if they're triggering things for you, don't forget, 24/7, you can always phone Lifeline, 13 11 14. It's free on your mobile. So, yeah, please do that. Even if you just want to talk about it, 13 11 14. So, you didn't obviously go ahead with that idea of taking your own life, and the next day you said you went to William Booth again.
Yeah, I lobbed up there with you know, looking very, very shabby, and I lobbed up there, and they welcomed me with open arms, as the Salvation Army does, and they suggested that I come up to Dooralong. You know, I disappeared after my time at William Booth House, and probably left a lot of questions which are still semi-unanswered down there, and they just sort of thought it'd be a good idea for me to go to Dooralong and get a fresh start, you know, and so I went up to Dooralong.
Very low point in your life, this? Probably the lowest.
I was super confused. You know, I'd had a really good year followed by a really bad and confusing year, and I didn't know what was going on. You could have convinced me of anything at that point.
But the word Dooralong's been mentioned for the first time.
I knew what it was, and I had actually been out there before. I'd driven the Major out there from William Booth House a couple of times, and I knew it was there. I just hadn't experienced it yet.
It's 25 to 11, nearly 24 to 11 here on Rima's Central Coast. We're back talking to Dave. Just before the break, we were listening to Dave and hearing from him to where drink had brought him, and it brought him to the point of taking his own life, or thinking very seriously about it. He didn't. We're so grateful he didn't. He went to William Booth. He was welcomed with open arms. And now Dooralong starts to play an important part in his life. So you come along to Dooralong. What was your first week at Dooralong like?
You know, I was just so confused. I was very confused, and there's a lot of people out there and a lot of different personalities, and it was very much the new kid at school situation, and I really did not have too much to say in my first couple of days. But I knew from my experience at William Booth House a few things that I needed to implement immediately, and you know, one of the first things was I got a Bible, and I started to read and pray and get heavily back into my connection with God, because I knew that I'd been saved again. You know, I knew something had happened and that there was an experience there, and so I grabbed hold of that as quickly as I could. And
so you see God's hand and direction in the way that He led you back from that brink, and the suicide that we talked about led you back to William Booth, and then led you on to Dooralong.
Well, after my relapse, my pride and my ego wouldn't let me go back to William Booth. So how I got there it can only be divinely explained, I think.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't an option for me.
And so now you're at Dooralong and you have the sort of spiritual direction that's there. You're now starting to sort of nurture that spiritual side of yourself.
Yeah, well, you know, that's an important part for me. You know, it really is, and there's a few factors, you know, that I need to look after within my own being to ensure that I have a spiritual connection. So I, on a daily basis now, try and make sure that I lead a balanced life and that my routine is in check, because that's where I find my spiritual connection. You know, if a bit of my routine is out, or I'm doing too much of one thing, which I can tend to try and do to fill a void, my connection goes right out. And the weird thing about me is that I somehow think that it's God that's distanced himself.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's that I'm out of kilter, and it sort of blurs my connection a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I'm generally trying to fill a void that is God's space with something that's not God.
Yeah.
You know.
I think that's a common experience that we find, that, you know, sometimes we think, oh, where is God? Where is God? I don't feel His presence in my life. But we know, of course, that it's God doesn't move from us, but sometimes we turn our back and walk away from Him, and you know,
and that's my tendency.
Never ends up well.
Yeah, and that's my tendency, and the roller coaster ride out there is an emotional one. And when I feel emotions, I run. You know, that's my MO, and so it's hard for me to sort of what's really worked is just having a solid routine, and when these emotions come, I've got to stick even tighter to my routine.
Yeah.
And go through it.
And your routine is what?
Well, things like my exercise, my prayer, my meditation, my diet.
Yeah.
You know, I need to make sure that my fun, my recreation, you know, having fun, doing things that I enjoy, spending time with people, interacting with people. I mean, there's a whole long list of things, and I need to make sure that I engage in all of them to a certain degree, a little bit.
Yeah.
And when I do that, and I'm able to do that, I find that my connection with God is great.
Yeah. And so you've been at Dooralong how long now?
5 months.
5 months. Really hard work, I would imagine. Peeling back all those layers, going back, in your case, to that relationship you had with your mum and dad, and doing things to try and gain their attention. Sort of going back through all that can be quite, well, challenging, I guess, is the word we use.
Yeah. And that's why I'm grateful that I'm at a place where I'm at. You know, I can throw a wobbly out there and turn up an hour later, and everyone just looks around and goes, "It's all right." You know?
And the other great thing we've discovered from talking to guests is that it's the dual approach that they have, or the balanced, I think you would call it, that balanced approach that they have at Dooralong, where they have all the medics and the counsellors and the psychologists, and they deal with all that sort of counselling business, psychology business, but running in parallel with that is the spiritual growth and the spiritual sort of awareness, and there's a really healthy balance at Dooralong. Is that something that you find?
Yeah, I find, and the way that I see that a lot is I see it in other people. You know, I see people come in and, you know, 3 months down the track I'll be talking to them and I'll suddenly get a flashback to the first day I met that person, and I'll go, wow. You know, because I don't often see the change in myself. It's hard for me to see that, but wow, I see it in other people.
Yeah.
And I'll often say to them, do you remember yourself when you first came in? You know, because you are a different person. And that's where I see God working out there.
Yeah. So you read the Bible, you pray?
Yeah.
And you go to church?
I go to chapel twice a week.
Yeah. And on Sundays?
On Sundays I go to North Lakes, Salvos.
Yeah.
So I drive the bus down there, and I take a whole busload of us down there, and we go down there for worship, and it's good.
Good church?
Great church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Young church, is it?
Get into it. It is quite young.
Yeah.
But there's a whole variety of age groups there, but they get into it, you know.
Yeah. So when people now talk about your church family, that means something now for you?
Well, it does, and look, you know, that they're relationships that I think are built over time, and as I've only been in this area for 5 months, but you know, that is, I think community on a whole is something that has become big for me, and
fellowship.
Fellowship and relationship. You know, these are big words for me now, and moving forward, I've been such a surface level nomadic, as you said before, person. It's time for me to be rooted into the ground with some people, and
wasn't
that's
so
what
much nomadic as just running away.
Well, exactly. That was my thing, run away, because I was afraid to front up,
Yeah.
And
as a Kelly question for you, is there one thing that has surprised you about people at church, or your sort of relationships at church, or was it very much as you expected? Or are there things there that you said, oh, it surprises me?
I just think that there was stigma around that for me for a long time, and now I just see that people are people.
Yeah.
And everyone, people that go to church are the same as people that don't go to church. They just have a place where they like to community, where they do their community, and I think the benefits there are great, because it's support and it's family.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of that in the outside world.
And there is no judgment. That surprised me when I first became a Christian in the late 1990s, that every church that I've sort of been to, I think since then, they have just welcomed people without judgment, and just unconditionally. And so if there's anybody out there who has had a bad relationship with churches in the past, just give it another go. Good churches will welcome you wherever you are and whatever you've done.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So what does the future hold for Dave?
I'm unsure. I don't like to. I like to take things gradually these days. It took me a long time to get to where I am, and it's going to take me a bit to get out. And there is always this overbearing sense of needing to make up for lost time, and it hasn't been a winning recipe for me in the past. But I do understand that I want to have a quality of life, and I think that the experiences that I've had can help others, and I'd like to get into work, helping others. I'm going to get into the community services study, and whether I get into AOD, drug and alcohol work, or maybe youth work, I just see that I just want to help other people. The experience that I've had with my broken up family and me being how I was when I was younger, I can see a lot of that going on in the world right now.
Yeah.
And look, if I can be there when the window's open for a young kid to make a change in his life, that can see him either come to Jesus or make a difference and move on and have a happy life from a situation that might be hopeless for him, I want to be there. I want to be able to facilitate or help at least.
Which is maybe why God placed his hand on your shoulder in that motel room when you were thinking of taking your life. That
you can't
he had a job for you to do.
All these experiences that I've had can't be for nothing. It's just impossible.
Yeah. Look, it's been really great talking to you today, Dave. Thanks for coming in. Give our regards to everybody at Dooralong. They do such a fantastic job. And as always, we just end these conversations just praying that God will continue to have his hand upon your shoulder, and that he will continue to guide you as he guided you away from that sort of deep dark pit that you were in, that his hand will continue to be on you and guide you to light and hope and joy.
It's good.
It's good. Life is good. You've been listening to an encore presentation of the Dooralong stories, which can be heard live every Wednesday at 10 a.m. and repeated 8 p.m. Sunday and 1 a.m. Wednesday, right here on 94.9 rema.cc.